Hi, I'm Dan Carlson with Carlson Design. We are makers of things, furniture, restoration of old antique pieces, gates, railings, anything you can think of, we make it. We're in my shop today to put the Festool TS55 REQ track saw system to the test. Now, Festool has made a claim that under certain circumstances, this system can replace a table saw, a miter saw, and a panel saw. Tool Select has asked me to put it to the test. I'm here to make several different cuts today. We're going to build a few different projects and put this thing through the ringer and see how she does. I'm cutting a sign panel out of 3/4 inch MDO plywood. It's got to have nice edges all the way around, so I'm hoping to make a splinter-free cut with this saw. I've got the depth set to 3/4 of an inch, so it goes just down through the material because I've got some 2x4s under here holding it up. And I've got the fence lined up on one edge here. This saw rides in this track. I got the speed turned all the way up. In most cases in my shop I'd use a panel saw for this. Out in the field I'd use a circular saw to make the cut, but it tends to chip the edge out, so I'm interested to see how this thing will do. Oh yeah, that's a nice clean cut. Yeah, I would definitely use this saw for when I need a chip-free precision cut. If I didn't need to be so precise, I'd still use my panel saw, but this is worth the time it took to set it up. Okay, so what I'm set up to do here is two things. I'm going to cut the bottom off this door, nice and parallel, and then I'm going to cut a panel out of the bottom for a pet door entrance. This is a no-skid bottom on this straight edge, so I can simply line that up on my marks, and I'm ready to go. Just made a very quick work of cutting the bottom of the door off, laying this straight edge in place by eyeballing it, simply setting the saw on and cutting it saved me a lot of time. Typically I would have to measure that, lay the line out, score it with a knife to keep it from chipping, and then clamp a board down to ride my circular saw through. Same thing with the plunge cut here. Normally I would have to take a circular saw and manually drop it down in, which can be very inaccurate and difficult to do. This has the inner workings to let me plunge down through. Being that I'm riding in this aluminum track, it just held me true and straight, and you saw how fast it was for me to do that. I can't think of any other tool I would rather use to do this application. It's going to take a little handsaw work to finish the cuts here, but I'm done. Here I have a panel glued up of 2-inch strips of pine. We cut these pieces at random and glued them up, knowing we would later then cut the parallel edge off with the track here. Typically, I would use a table saw or a panel saw to cut this, and it's chippy, it's not accurate, it takes a lot of setup, but now I've simply clamped this track system to it. I'm going to ride the saw in here, plunge in, and cut it off. This could be a panel door, a shelf, a tabletop, or even a sign panel. We do a lot of this in our shop regularly. Okay, so the panel cross cuts have been made. I've done both sides. It's perfectly square. I'm really impressed with the quality and accuracy of the cut. Normal circumstances, I would have had to use my table saw or a panel saw with a lot more setup and not nearly as nice a cut. I think in this circumstance, Festool is correct, and this would replace my table saw, panel saw for this type of use. This panel's ready to shoot through the sander, and it'll become a tabletop very soon. So here I have an expensive piece of veneered plywood. I'm going to make a cabinet top. I need to cut a back beveled miter on one end of it, a 45-degree cut. Normally I would use my miter saw to do this, or a table saw. I can't use a miter saw because it's too deep and the miter saw won't cut that deep. So then I go to my table saw. I would have to have help another person to help guide it through the saw. And cutting, as you know, on a back bevel on a table saw is very difficult. You get a lot of chipping and it's hard to keep it straight. I got the track system set up here. I've got a fine tooth blade in this saw. It's set up on a 45-degree angle here. My plunge is set to depth. Oh, it's perfect. Not a chip. Very nice. No splinters whatsoever. My cutoff piece fits right back in. I have a perfect edge. I understand and believe now the Festool's claim that this could replace a table saw or a miter saw, in that I couldn't use a miter saw because of the depth of the wood. But if I were on a job site and didn't have the luxury of having my cabinet saw with me, this would be the ultimate tool to use in that application. I'm very impressed with the saw. Okay, here we have a simulation in my shop of deck, what it would look like if we were building a deck. Running the boards randomly off the edge like this, so I can demonstrate the Festool track saw. Typically, you could cut these boards on a miter saw in your shop or on the job and run them all the same length. That would take a lot of time, tape measuring and penciling. I wouldn't want to do that. So another way to do it is to measure and mark, chalk line it, cut on the chalk line, and then you could clamp a board to it and follow that with a circular saw. Festool provides these 4-foot tracks for their saw with some splines so I can put 4-foot sections together. There's a no-stick back on them, so I can slide that up to the line, and I should be able to just cut right down this without having to clamp it. So I'm going to give that a try. Nice and straight. Okay, here we have a 4x8 sheet of plywood. We're going to demonstrate a special angle cut on this with the Festool track saw system. And as we know, we wouldn't be able to cut an angle like this long on a miter saw or a panel saw. So that leaves the table saw, and that can prove to be dangerous. And a lot of times we don't have a table saw out on the job site. In this case, we're demonstrating an angle cut that would be for roofing or for a gable end. But the other option, most guys would clamp a board down, set up, measure, clamp, cut with a circular saw. And I'm going to show if Festool is more efficient than that with this track system. Okay, so you've seen we've made the